Hi friends, welcome to Truth Bites. I'm Sarah. I'm a follower of Jesus, a wife, a mom, and I'm someone who's passionate about studying the Bible. So, as I mentioned last week, I really want to get into the book of Matthew, and I want to talk about how Jesus referenced the Old Testament quite frequently. But before I even get there, I need to start with who is Matthew and who wrote the book of Matthew. So let me start by saying that oral tradition was a huge part of Jewish culture. And back in the Babylonian invasion, 500-600 years before Christ, the Babylonians invaded Israel, burned down the temple, destroyed everything. And so the scrolls upon which the Holy Scriptures had been written, many of them were destroyed or lost. But even before then, it had been a part of Jewish tradition to memorize the Scriptures. Each family had different parts that they were to remember. Each tribe was responsible for certain parts. And so memorization of Scripture was a huge part of what it meant to be a Jew. And so with that in mind, when Jesus came to the earth and began to do his ministry, his followers were taking note of everything that he was doing. They weren't literally writing it down, but they were committing it to memory, because this is what they do. When a teacher starts teaching you about the Scriptures, you memorize what he says, and you pay attention and take note of everything that he does. That's what they had been doing. And then you share that with others. That's what the disciples had been doing. For 30-40 years after Jesus' ascension, they were talking about him. They were sharing these stories that would eventually be written down into the book of Matthew. So that's the tradition, and that is how it eventually got written down. Now, we don't have any definitive, concrete evidence that Matthew was the writer of the gospel according to Matthew, but that is a long-held tradition. And when I say long-held, I mean back into the early days of the church. It was understood, it was believed that this was the gospel according to Matthew, also known Levi, a tax collector who followed Jesus, was one of the 12 disciples who followed Jesus when he was alive. So this is a man who knew Jesus and who had listened to him for the 3-ish years that he was on the earth, committed these things to memory, and is now sharing those things. Now, all of that said, the gospel, according to Matthew, is not the history of Jesus, according to Matthew, or the ministry of Jesus, according to Matthew. It is the gospel. And so what I mean by that is Matthew had a purpose when he wrote this down. His purpose was not to tell a story. His purpose was to show that Jesus was the Messiah that the Jews had been waiting for all of eternity, all of history. So he says that really right off the bat. In the very first chapter of Matthew, he says, "This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham." Short sentence, lots of meaning. Jesus is the Messiah, he says. Messiah means the anointed one. Jesus is the son of David, or descendant of David, who was king of Israel, and the son of Abraham, who was the father of all the Jews. He was the one who entered into covenant with Yahweh. And so by giving us this, in this one short sentence, Matthew is telling us a lot about who Jesus was and about what he's setting out to show you throughout this entire book. And so as we read through the book of Matthew, we find references back to the Old Testament, to the prophets, over and over and over again. In fact, Matthew may have, and I don't have research to back this up, but I feel reasonably confident that Matthew references the Old Testament more than any other gospel in showing who Jesus was, because he's more explicitly telling you who Jesus is than any of the other gospels. He's showing, as a Jew, he is a Jew, and he's speaking to Jews who know the Holy Scriptures. His whole point is to tell you, you know that guy we've been waiting for? This is him. So that's where I want to start. So as we go through Matthew, and I'm not going to take it chapter by chapter, but I'm going to kind of hit some highlights throughout the book. The thing that you're going to see over and over again is these references to the Old Testament. And so those are those gems that we're going to be digging out of the storehouse to hold up against the new gems. So if you want to start reading through the book of Matthew, and so that you're prepared for what I'm going to talk about, that'd be awesome. But if not, that's okay too. I'll just share what I feel led to share. But the genealogy is going to be where we start next week. It's interesting. It's again very pointed, and that's what I want you to hear today, is that Matthew is not being manipulative. He's just setting up his purpose in writing. He has a structure here that is intentional. So because Matthew is so intentional to show who Jesus is, we're really going to see those new and old gemstones side by side, held out together, just like we talked about last week. So my challenge to you this week is to go through the book of Matthew. I'm not asking you to read the whole thing, but maybe just read the first chapter, first and couple of chapters, and look for those references to the Old Testament. One of my favorite Bible speakers is Tim Mackey from the Bible Project, and he uses the term hyperlinks. I love that. It's so relevant to us, because we understand what a hyperlink is. Of course, they had no clue what a hyperlink was when they wrote the Bible, but it's true. It's what they do sort of throughout the entire book, or collection of books, really. You will constantly see these hyperlinks that say, oh, go look there, or go look there. And they're not explicit all the time. That's why we need to study the word, so that we know the old gems are in there in the storeroom to go look for them. So I hope that you will take a look at Matthew, the first couple of chapters, look for those hyperlinks, see what you find. And I hope that you'll be as excited as I am to see how poignant and relevant and beautiful this story is as it comes together. So that's all for this week. I hope that I've encouraged you to read the Bible for yourself. And remember, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free.